Hi all, welcome to the session. Today we will be discussing about the topic working capital. So we all know what is capital. Capital is the investment or the total funds brought by the owner of the business to start his enterprise. A business enterprise mainly needs two types of capital, namely fixed capital as well as working capital. Fixed capital is that part of capital which is used to purchase or which is used to invest in fixed assets like plant, machinery, building, etc. And the second one, the working capital, is that part of capital which is needed for the day-to-day operations of the business. So working capital is mainly used for purchasing raw materials, for the day-to-day expenses of the business, for meeting the expenses or for payment of wages, etc. So working capital simply means investment in current assets. So before defining what is working capital, we need to know a term or a concept known as operating cycle concept. Operating cycle concept is the time that is taken to convert the raw materials into cash, or the time that is taken to for purchasing of, or the time that is in between purchase of raw materials and collection of cash from the sales is known as operating cycle concept. That is, here we can see the concept, that is, we will be starting with the cash and we will be ending with the cash. First of all, we will be purchasing with the cash, we will be purchasing the raw materials, and with the raw materials, it will be converted into the work in progress. The work in progress will be converted into finished goods, and the finished goods will sell it to the customers at a particular, means adding a profit to the finished goods. We will be selling it to the customers either at cash or at credit. So if we are selling for the cash, we will be realizing the cash at the same time. If we are selling it for credit, the debtors, one day they will be giving us the, or they will be making the payment. So then we will be able to realize our receivables or debtors. So at last we are getting into cash itself. So we are starting from the cash and we are ending with the cash itself. So this particular cycle, this goes on. This cycle is known as operating cycle concept. Shortly, it means all the assets which comes under working capital revolves around cash. This is what the operating cycle concept says. Next, we will be defining the working capital. Here I am providing you three main definitions provided by Ramamurthy, J.M. Mill and Gerstenberg. The first definition is given by Ramamurthy, where he says working capital refers to the funds which a company must possess to finance its day-to-day operations. And according to J.M. Mill, working capital is the sum of the current assets of the firm. And according to Gerstenberg, the excess of current assets over current liabilities is what is known as working capital. Next, we will be going to look at the concept of working capital. So mainly there are two concepts of working capital, namely gross working capital and net working capital. According to gross working capital refers to the total current assets of the firm. So to find out the working capital of the firm, only we need to add the total current assets of the firm. So this concept mainly emphasizes on the quantitative aspect of the working capital, and it is mainly used to it is mainly used for the effective management of the working capital of the company. The next concept is net working capital, where working capital refers to the difference between the current assets and current liabilities, or the net current assets is what is known as working capital. So according to net working capital, or the net concept, working capital is equal to current assets minus current liabilities. This particular concept emphasizes on the qualitative aspect of the working capital and is mainly used to judge the soundness of the financial position of the company. This net working capital could either be positive or negative. When the current assets exceeds the current liabilities, it is known as positive working capital, whereas when the current liabilities exceeds the current assets, it is known as negative working capital. Next, we will be looking at the components of the working capital. Working capital comprises of two main components, current assets and current liabilities. Current assets are those assets which could be converted into cash within a short span of time or normally within 1 year. Example for current assets could be cash in hand, cash at bank, sundry debtors, bills receivable, stock which may consist of stock in raw materials, stock in work in progress, stock of finished goods, prepaid expenses, accrued income, etc. The second component is current liabilities. The liabilities which could be paid off immediately, that is, which could be paid off within a short span of time, usually within 1 year, is termed as current liabilities. Examples for current liabilities could be sundry creditors, bank overdraft, bills payable, outstanding expenses, income received in advance, etc. The last topic for the session will be classification of working capital. We can classify working capital broadly into two: permanent working capital and temporary working capital. Permanent working capital is that minimum amount of working capital that is required for the day-to-day operations of the business. If the activities of the business have to be smoothly moved on, this particular minimum amount of working capital is required. So that working capital is known as permanent working capital. We can divide the permanent working capital again into three: initial working capital, regular working capital, and reserve working capital. Initial working capital is that part of working capital which is required when the business is commenced, or when the business is going to, or the capital that is needed at the initial stage of the business is what is known as initial working capital. The second one is regular working capital. It is the minimum amount of working capital that is required to ensure the circulation of current assets from cash to raw materials, from raw materials to finished goods, from finished goods to receivables, from receivables to cash, and so on. The third division of permanent working capital is reserve working capital, which is the excess amount over the requirement for regular working capital. And this reserve working capital will be mainly used for providing for the contingencies that may arise in during emergencies like abnormal situations like depression, rise in prices, strikes, etc. And the second broad classification is temporary working capital or variable working capital. It is the working capital which is mainly needed to meet the seasonal demands of the company. And this temporary working capital, as the name itself mentions, it varies according to the volume of the business. This temporary working capital again could be divided into two: seasonal working capital as well as special working capital. Seasonal working capital is that part of working capital which is needed to meet the seasonal needs of the business, or this particular working capital is mainly needed during the busy business stages, or those periods when the business is in hike, means in the festive seasons like Eid, Onam, holidays, etc. The special working capital, again, it is a working capital which is mainly needed to meet the emergency situations. So these are the main things that you have to look when studying about working capital. So with this, I'm ending my session. Thank you.